Hi, Luciana. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, thank you so much for your invitation.
My pleasure. Luciana, give the listeners and the viewers just a very quick introduction of who you are, what you're doing right now.
Sure. I'm Luciana Mansolelli. I'm the Chief Quality Officer for Minaris Advanced Therapies. We are a CDMO company. And as for myself, I am a pharmacist by degree. Once upon a time, I was a pharmacist. And my entire career, 27 years now, in the pharmaceutical industry. And I've been fortunate enough to hop over into advanced therapies early on in the journey with companies like Novartis, J&J. And then most recently, I joined Minaris as my first CDMO experience.
Excellent. So before we get to Minaris, take us back to the beginning of your career. What pulled you into science in the first place?
So I remember clearly a professor who walked us into the campus at the university in my hometown in Brazil. And this was in high school, right? And he pulled us into the campus and walked through the campus talking about the different areas of science, the different areas and opportunities. And I absolutely loved, lean towards medicine, lean towards medical sciences, health sciences for that matter. Loved biology, loved chemistry as well. And in that tour, actually, of the campus was the first time that I was, exposed to that reality of biology and chemistry coming together into pharmaceutical sciences. So that was for me a clear resolve, maybe leaning towards more clinical pharmacy at first. And through college is that I got very fascinated by processes, by industrial pharmacy. And that's where I focused my studies after into the PharmD degree, just very focused on industrial pharmacy.
And when did quality, the profession of quality, first appear on your radar?
Yeah, much, much later. It's my ongoing joke that I came to the dark side much later of the force, right? I started off at Boehringer Ingelheim as a trainee where I had the opportunity to experiment with different areas. Newly graduated from college, I spoke several languages. I speak several languages. And that was actually the reason why they pulled me into a fascinating project where it was the first fully automated liquid dosage plant in Brazil. So Boehringer Ingelheim was going for centers of excellence, and that was the intention for that particular plant. I had the opportunity as a pharmacist, right, to see the reactors coming in, the walls of the building closing in, and all the automation, welding, connection, fixed DMAX, P&Ls being created. And it was fantastic for me as a pharmacist to get exposed to all of that. In the meantime, we had the company doing the automation was from France. The company doing the filling lines was from Italy, and English was the official language in the company. And that is, again, in Brazil, where Portuguese is the mother tongue, right? So it was a fascinating experience, multicultural, that allowed me not only to learn that there was so much more, right, to the industry, but also how to bring people along in the journey. We had operators, Hamish, that had 25 years in that particular plant, operating the same way, true and tried processes, very well established products. And, my mission was to bring them over into what was an industrial mouse, into what was like a completely automated plant. And it was a phenomenal experience and early learning that is through people that you do the best quality work, right? And it was, yeah, very, very early on. And I was very fortunate with that experience.
Yeah. When you look back at that time, or I suppose when you look back at the first 10, 15 years of your career, Do you think that you were aiming towards something? Did you always have a goal in mind of which way you'd like to take your career?
No, I don't think so. I think I had the fascination for learning, the curiosity. And I think that has grounded the decisions throughout my career, early on as well as recently, right? If I tell you I had aspired to the role of chief quality officer, I would say not really. But the curiosity of learning in the space of CDMO brought me here. And several of the career decisions that I have made, and one thing that it's very interesting to share with you here about this very first experience was the day I decided to leave the company and for the first time in the industry change jobs, right? And that was one day in that supervisory room where all the controllers were there, right? So we had the fixed Emacs application, we had the monitoring of all the reactors, the tanks, and all of a sudden, I'm in the computer, an alarm rang. I just rolled the chair back and I knew which sensor, which tank, which alarm. That scared me because I realized at that very moment I was not learning. I was on autopilot, right? And early in my career, I think that was a scary thought, and it became a big driver for me in the choices after that. Really, truly seeking for opportunities to continuously learn, to expand.
And that was at Boehringer.
Beringer Ingelheim, yes.
Fine. So you moved. Did you go from Boehringer to J&J? Is that right?
No. I went from Beringer to a local Brazilian generic company and then to Novartis. Novartis in Brazil. And then with Novartis, I had the opportunity to move to the US as an expat. Phenomenal opportunity already in quality at that time, group compliance and audit, overseeing manufacturing sites globally. So another phenomenal experience with a lot of different cultural exposure. Novartis at the time had 109 manufacturing sites, a very huge footprint. So it was a fantastic experience as well.
So you spent a large part of your career then in large pharma, big pharma, before moving into the CDMO world recently.
hmm
So, firstly, what made you decide to make that move?
So I was in J&J working in an area called regulatory compliance. Great opportunity creating a connection between the site level compliance and the regulatory compliance at a crucial time in the industry where regulators are evolving their inspection techniques, inspection frameworks, moving towards a more risk based approach. What I mean by that is not just the risk based in terms of selecting who do I inspect here or there, but also in the approach, how they ask the inspection questions, right? It was very traditional that you would go to your deviations investigations and utilize that as the framework for your inspection scrutiny. Today, as this evolution came about, you see more a lot of the risk management approach and questions, where the regulators are very focused on understanding how the company manages risk. What is your risk appetite? What are the controls that you bring towards the admitted risks that exist in any process, right? And how do you evolve those risks, evolve those controls as you learn from the process? So bringing the life cycle into the risk management and utilizing that framework to your inspection format. So very powerful momentum, in my opinion, to be in the regulatory compliance world. And that's the space I was at with J&J, overseeing the large molecules and the advanced therapies sites in the J&J network. Common through network, actually, I was approached by the chairman of the board here at Minaris with a question, right? How do you see that the quality systems need to evolve to be fit for purpose for advanced therapies? So this is an area where speed and quality are often framed as competitors. In advanced therapies, that framing is absolutely wrong. The real risk is actually moving too slowly, right? There's so much innovation. There is so much that the patients need. There's so much being developed in the space of ultra rare disease, in the space of unmet needs, right? So the true risk is actually moving fast without integrating science, risk, and regulatory intent. So that particular question was to me very insightful. And, one area where ever since I started in advanced therapies early 2018, where Kymriah was being approved, the very first CAR T therapy in the US. And I was fortunate enough to join that program. I always had that thought process, right? What is fit for purpose? Can I, under the compressed clinical timelines, under evolving processes, literally changing the wheels of the plane with the plane flying, right? How can the quality systems be, instead of the reactive oversight, document heavy approaches, be actually a true fit for purpose enabler of this evolution, right? So it was a good meet of the minds, let's call it that, with a challenge that I had always thought would be very interesting to tackle. And that came with the opportunity of this role at Minaris.
Excellent. I suppose talk about that transition then from Big Pharma into the CDMO world. Such a big change. When you first arrived into Minaris, what was your immediate mandate? What were your initial challenges that you had to face?
Yeah, so here the mandate was quite interesting because this is a newly formed company, right? That came from existing companies. So we had 5 sites coming together, and they were definitely 5 cultures coming together, right? So how to use that as an enabler for the right quality and risk mindset in the space of the CDMO. I came cautiously optimistic around running quality in this space where there's a lot of the need to bring not only your own people along the journey, but also clients, right? In different phases of their development journey, in different phases of their product journey, and bring them along into that risk-based thinking, proactive thinking that is so foundational if you think about decision making in advanced therapies, CDMO or not, right? I was pleasantly surprised to see that there was a lot of appetite, a lot of acceptance of, again, the proactive thinking, the risk based thinking being pragmatically implemented into this space. As far as the CDMO space, I went back, reviewed everything that I had learned and heard about operating in the CDMO space. And I saw 2 critical elements. One of them is a criticism around the turnover rate of personnel in the CDMO space. So how to keep talent, how to keep your workforce. And then the second piece, which is probably a byproduct of that, is the lack of investment on capability development. And just, back to the beginning of our conversation here, as what drives me as a leader, I translate that curiosity, I translate what drives me as one of the core legacies that a leader can leave is building capabilities. So that was the great mandate, very much supported by Orla. Orla is our CEO. She has a very good quality mindset, understands the scope, and that it's not an area you want to compromise, right? But quality is bigger than the quality organization.
Yeah.
So being at the executive level at the company also afforded me to help influence that decision base is not based on the organization quality. That quality should always have a seat at the table, but not because we're quality, but rather because we have the right skill set, we have the right knowledge base, our opinion is sought after, and it's a partner in the decision making process, right? As much as operations, as much as your commercial team. So it's that integration between scientific understanding into the decision making, the translation of risk into a documented rationale, which is usually attributed to the quality organization, right? And then enabling how do you align operational decisions with all the regulatory commitments, the regulatory requirements, sometimes commitments that are not even our own, they are from the sponsor coming in. So that transparency and communication and participation on the strategy is extremely critical. Like I can't stress enough. In any case, in the sponsor company, all that I mentioned should apply. But in the CDMO space, also because you become a risk-based decision partner that can support, influence the strategy for the sponsor, for the BLA application, for the IND write up, right? So this is not really a philosophical shift. It's really something that is operationally necessary to be successful in this fast-paced environment that we live in.
So you mentioned that you identified two criticisms or challenges, one being the workforce management and the flow of talent due to the nature, I suppose, of the CDMO world, and then the second was capability. Was that based on your prior experience? Was that something you did, you assessed when you came into Minaris, and it was very much a challenge within the organization? And then how did you I suppose, go about solving those issues, those challenges? Obviously, that's not an overnight fix. It's quite deep-rooted operational, structural challenges.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, the assessment of that risk was a pragmatic review, like making the decision to come to this space and willing to learn how to operate in the CDMO space, in the CDMO side of the partnership, not the sponsor side of the partnership. I truly went back into conference presentations. I went back into some regulatory interactions and interactions that I had with through PDA. I was part of the Regulatory Affairs Quality Assurance Board. So all that industry exchange in ISPE, part of the ATMP board. And I truly went back and did my homework around revisiting those same DAX presentations, informations that were shared, but now with this different lens, right? Being on the side of the CDMO, on the side of the partnership of the CDMO. And that's how I flagged those very critical elements. Coming into Minaris, again, as I mentioned to you, 5 sites coming together with varied levels of that, let's call problem statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some sites with a little more stability, already supporting commercial programs, other sites with the descriptor of the issue that I had researched and coming about and bringing the right team, the right capabilities to support this journey became very clear to me after this research.
Yeah, I suppose this, the the talent flow or the churn, whatever you want to call it. What does that look like in practice? On a day-to-day basis, how does that show up?
Yes, absolutely. So, looking at the quality organization and looking at the multiple elements that we interact, right? So, the science, the risk, the regulatory aspects of it. I basically, for the global quality organization, I created a few buckets that are quite intuitive: quality systems, compliance, right? But two extra buckets, if you will. One of them that is grounded on the regulatory compliance background. I call it quality partnerships, but it's really an area that sits at the crux of enabling the different stages, the different phases of the programs that we support here. So I may have a client on phase one, another phase two, pivot, going into pivotal, supporting the BLA write up, the CMC portion that belongs to us. So that quality partnerships role goes across any of the sites and has to have intimate knowledge of what happens at the site, intimate knowledge of what the client needs are, and it's the conduit, right? Almost like a project management office would act as a conduit for that. The other area, which is highly specialized in our environment, it has evolved a lot recently, is quality validation, for lack of a better term. But what I mean by that is all the support around the validation strategy, your aseptic process simulations, your equipment qualification. In the space of cell and gene therapy, many times the equipment is the process. So the attributed organizational difference that I'm in engineering versus I am a process expert or a manufacturing sciences person versus I am in IT, as an example, or I am in operations, that becomes absolutely artificial when you're onboarding a program and you're talking about performance qualification, right? The equipment is the process. So setting up engineering reliability requires a heavy hand of information of the process that that particular piece of equipment is serving. It can't be demoted anymore, right? So that's what the regulatory framework back maybe 5 years now, when we departed from the V model and we went more into the risk-based approach. That's what it means. It's because all of this is colliding, and maybe the stratification organizationally that has happened in the past is now being forced into the product's king, the process rules. Everybody has to understand that, and the sooner you understand that, the more streamlined and scalable your processes will be, right? So, in order to retain that level of knowledge and talent, I have built across the sites, right? So, although they are allocated at each of the sites, but build across the sites, what is the skill set that we need? So, being very clear around attitudes and aptitudes that we need in each of the individuals working in this capacity, and then utilizing a model that I call flow to the work, where these capabilities, regardless of where they reside, they consult at all of the sites. And, being fairly small, I do appreciate the fact that we are geographically covering all the regions. We have sites in the US, in Germany, in Japan, but fairly small where we can flow to the work and support the clients at each of those locations with the best expertise possible in that technical area, if you will. where quality validation sits.
Yeah. You mentioned there, it's really interesting just to hear you explain how you've structured it all. And you mentioned that you were talking about selecting on attitude and not just aptitude. Is that correct?
Yes.
What does attitude look like to you when you're, building your quality team?
So, again, the attitude of I need to sit at the table. I'm part of this. I'm entrepreneurial. I think in the CDMO space is extremely important, but also the curiosity, the ever learning approach, the collaboration or solution oriented mindset. I think those are critical attitude elements that I evaluate and I ask the team to evaluate, right? Like I have by now met with everybody in the organization, and those are usually the questions that get me most of those interactions with every level, every individual in the organization is like, what drives you? Right? What wakes you up in the morning and says, "Hey, this is this is my driver. This is what I like doing." And obviously, in this space of advanced therapies, it's phenomenal the drive around the patients. And this is so close to us, right? As I mentioned to you early in my career, I went to industrial pharmacy, not to clinical, but soon enough, you're making product that goes to a distribution center. And your north is your north for sure, your drive. But here in advanced therapies, you're confronted with that reality that the cells you're handling at that particular moment, they are a patient cells, right? They are truly an individual person that deserves your best. We cannot negatively contribute to those cells. So, from a compliance standpoint, how do you build the systems around it? And it doesn't matter if I'm not the one handling the cells inside that biosafety cabinet, but I am the one writing this investigation and understanding that there is no 30 days in this process, right? I don't have 45 days because it involves a supplier. There is a patient in the end of this waiting for the therapy to be released. So all that, drive and attitude was a powerful point in the selection of the individuals that would go in with us in this journey.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So looking at where you're at right now, then you've got a team of around 200 people in the quality organization. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And then they're obviously global, sitting globally, different time zones, different cultures. Talk to us about you as a leader, because we started talking about the curiosity that you've been inbuilt with you, and some of your traits. I suppose what type of leader are you, and how do you go about getting the best out of your team who sit across different sites, different cultures, different time zones?
Yeah. So I think my core drive is I'm here to serve the organization. And that is something that I have imparted on also the global leaders in the organization. We can't afford to have a big global organization. This is overhead in the concept of a CDMO, right? But we have to have the type of servant leadership where we are enablers of the process. So my constant reminder is I need to ask each of the individuals, how can I help create the headspace? How can I help create the environment where it's safe to fail? And that's my main contribution is whenever there is ideation, whenever there is opportunity for experimentation, that I'm at the table, I'm enabling those discussions. With them and having the conversation to the level where people feel safe to speak up, people feel that they can contribute, and that if we fail together, we move on. Right? I can give you a couple of great examples that through this tenure with Minaris, I have seen implementation of new systems as an example. I mentioned to you the risk-based approach on equipment qualification. There was an interesting situation where quality in one of the sites had made the decision that they did not need to be involved in the workflow of onboarding an equipment into the equipment management system, right? This is engineering, maintenance, records are there. I can look up the records. Quality doesn't need to be involved there. So I had, through different conversations that came to my attention, I met with the team who made that decision. So my first commitment, stay curious, right? So my question to them was, what was the rationale? Why did you decide that way? And they had a rationale for that. They thought, okay, if an equipment is being onboarded is through a change control, and we're involved in the change control. If something were to happen and we have a calibration failure or something like that, there will be a deviation if it is in the process. Therefore, we're involved in the deviation process. So I reflected and, discussed with them, and I said, okay, I like it. There's a rationale. I appreciate that there was thought process around it. Now, where did we fail? Where do we depart in our thought process? And then I explained to them, a lot of what we just discussed around equipment, process, all in one. If I am not connected at that stage, helping determine the criticality of that equipment, therefore, calibration frequency, maintenance monitoring, equipment review, I am in the lagging side of this equation and not at the leading, building signals for the quality organization on where I need to act upon. And that becomes, a judgmental quality organization, not a partner into the process, right? So, with the expense of delay to the project, we took the decision, let's revisit that, let's redo, reset, right? And that was also a big difference coming from big companies where there's layers of discussion in that. Here, it's just way more nimble to make
Yeah.
the decision and pivot.
Yeah.
But to me, it was very important. I use this example to illustrate to you how, to me, it's very important to build an environment where it's safe to fail.
I've interviewed some outstanding leaders at CDMOs, over the years, but there are some CDMOs that do get a bad rep, and like you say, churn is high. Do you think that is purely down to, it's obviously a product of the nature of the CDMO world, but could leaders be better generally? Do you think we could try to improve future leaders and the capability of people? And do you think the industry could do more to help improve the general sort of tenure across the CDMO landscape?
100%, 100%. And I think it is about, again, the engagement, the opportunity to foster that curiosity, right? So we bring people in this space of advanced therapies, as an example, who have, high degrees sometimes, right? They are scientists, they are curious, they are interested, and we can't just temper it down, tune it off with 300,000 pages of procedures or detailed batch records that are not fit for, again, the generation that we're leading, that training programs that are fully based on read and understand, that don't look at learning styles, right, of this generation, of my generation. So all of that needs to be built in as you build the systems. And to the point that I drove before, I think capability development is the biggest investment, right? In Minaris, for example, we have kickstarted our compliance academy where every site leader and site quality leader have to participate. And then other talented individuals are invited as well to participate in that compliance academy. The way we handle it is for each type of process, and that's the other beauty of the CDMO space compared to the sponsor side, is that the variety of the therapies and the platforms that we handle here is much bigger, right? Now we're creating a pathway where you think about CAR T, and we pragmatically train and discuss with each of those groups in the Compliance Academy the science behind it, the process, equipment, technologies, the regulatory framework, be that US, Europe, Japan, how it's faced, and then we overlay the risk-based decision making as an enabler for the decision at every level of the organization. So I firmly believe in that model. I firmly believe that building capabilities is a big differentiator with opportunities of flexing the workforce so that that critical mass of your workforce is not going to be let go every time a project moves on or unfortunately doesn't have the ideal clinical data coming from it, but rather that we can continuously foment and build responsibly, right, in terms of resources into that pool of work that flows to the work, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, that's really. Thank you for sharing those insights, Luciana. Really good practical insights that people can take away, whether they're in the CDMO world or not. I suppose what my final sort of question around you and where you're at now is, what are you looking forward to now? What are you most excited about in this next phase of your career?
Yeah, I think this opportunity with multiple therapies, like we serve a model that in my mind would not be sustainable unless we are very cost conscious, right? So thinking about the benefit of these therapies to the patients, but also reflecting on the fact that this is an entire facility operating on a patient per batch basis in many cases, right? So how do we continue to integrate science, risk, regulatory understanding to support advanced therapies manufacturing, make this a sustainable, not only possible, but a sustainable model for the future. I think there's no way to deny the benefit of these therapies, right? It's absolutely what the future holds for us. The core challenge is to make this into a sustainable model where these therapies become accessible across the board. So, be that through further development of in vivo viral vector applications, be that on allogeneic solutions, but also the evolution on the autologous side, where the ultra rare disease space can be favored, where, now going into solid tumors as well. Like it's, the science in this area is fascinating. It's ever expanding. And for me personally, integrating QA into the science, risk, and regulatory understanding and being truly an enabler in this space is a big mission. And I'm super happy with the challenge and with the individuals that I was able to bring along for the ride here at Minaris.
Well, look, Luciana, wishing you all the best with what's ahead. It sounds like it's a challenging time for the industry, but an exciting time with so much potential, like you say. Final, very quick fire question: one word to describe your first year in the CDMO side?
Great question. I would go with challenging.
Great. Yeah, that's fair enough. It
It
sounds.
wouldn't, yeah, it wouldn't be sincere otherwise.
Luciana, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you sharing some really practical insights there. It's been great getting to know you and learning your story and journey, and wishing you all the best with what's ahead with Minaris.
Thank you so much.